Hey everybody, and welcome again to another episode of Faithful Flyers. I'm Peter Grodi, your friendly neighborhood seminarian. Let's talk a little bit about Lent. I know you guys have probably heard everything you've ever wanted to hear about Lent in this last week, and we're probably thinking, if someone talks to me about Lent one more time, I'm going to rip their arms off. I understand. Bear with me for one more little blurb about Lent. I'll do my best not to be too repetitive, the things you've learned before. In fact, I'm going to try to help you see it from just a slightly different perspective. We all know probably the three things the church asks of us during Lent, asks us to do during Lent. If you don't know them, here they are again. Please do these things. Prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. We've all heard those three things before, hopefully many, many times. I'm going to talk about the purposes behind these three things. I'm going to talk about three different purposes that may give you a little bit of a different perspective on how you live them out and also why to live them out. Okay, one of the three purposes of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving is to remove some of the barriers in our life between us and God. I mean, we all have these barriers, right? We all have sinned in different ways, but more importantly, we all struggle with particular sins more than others. And sometimes we have a lot of vices. Sometimes there's just so many things in our life that we just don't know where to start. The nice thing about Lent is it's this pre-packaged 40-day time for us to sit down and say, okay, there is one thing that I'm going to try to do this Lent. I'm going to try to get rid of this particular vice or this particular manifestation of this vice. So you make a special effort to give up that thing and replace it with a good virtue. And hopefully in the space of this 40 times, you can eliminate one of those barriers. I know it's not very encouraging to think, oh, I can only work on one thing and there's so many more things to work on, but that's what life is all about. It's the step-by-step process we try to take to grow more in line with God's will. And this could be any manner of vice that you give up. I mean, you could be struggling with, chronic ill will towards certain people in your life. You could be struggling with chronic impurity of thought in various ways. You could be struggling with chronic overindulgence in food or television or any of these things. Whatever the case may be, hopefully you can make some significant progress in overcoming that vice in your life by, first of all, committing to giving up that practice, the thing that you do, making a positive action to counteract that practice. So, replace it with a good practice or try to do things that are counteractive to the thing that you're doing. For instance, like if you struggle with thinking badly about people in your life, make an active effort to try to think about the good things about them, to try to think about what's redemptive about that person. And finally, raise a prayer to God about it whenever you're tempted to fall back into the practice, because truly we can do none of these things without God's help. As an example, you may make a habit of speaking badly about people in your life, like idly disparaging their looks, their abilities, and things like that. It really doesn't have anything to do with whether it's true or not, but it's more about taking things that you perceive as bad about that person and just making them your personal whipping boy. The person that you make fun of or you speak badly about behind their back, either to be more popular in front of the people around you or just to give you someone to beat down on to make yourself feel better. I mean, there's so many different reasons, but that is such a common practice for us, just to find someone and then make them our personal whipping boy. So what are you going to do? Well, you could commit to not talking that way about them. You could try to find a good thing about them to mention instead of a bad thing. And you could say a prayer for them every time you find yourself noticing something bad about them. Okay, a second purpose of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving is to quiet our hearts and quiet our lives in order to let God speak to us more clearly. I did a video a while back called Becoming Empty in Order to be Filled, and it was about looking at all the different things that we fill our time with. Just constantly in our days, we're filling our time with various things, various comforts, various unnecessary things, even in the midst of necessary things. And, it's a really interesting practice to try, a very revealing practice to try. If you can go through a day, remind yourself this, go through a day and count the number of times when you have a moment and you think, what to do? What do I do now? What do I do with the time I have between this and the next thing I have to? Count the number of times you think that and immediately turn to your phone, the television, to texting friends, to going online. I mean, just any number of these things. Think of the number of times that you immediately just turn to a distraction. Okay? Think of that how many times. Imagine how much time you would have if you took a few of those times when you had 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, and just raised it to God. Tried to pray to God. I mean, we all like to say, right? We all like to say that we do not have enough time in our lives to pray, right? To pray a little bit every day. We like to say that. Or I like to say I don't have enough time in my life to pray the amount that, people think I should pray or whatever. The truth is, it's bullcrap. It really is. Because we like to fill in those spaces that are opportunities for us to pray without even thinking about doing anything else, without even thinking about praying those things, because we like the comfort. This is an opportunity for us to pray. This is an opportunity for us to fast from some of these things very intentionally, to fast from some of those moments where we just want to distract ourselves, and then to make an intentional choice to pray in that moment. The third one is penance and intercession. In today's environment and culture, we have an immediate aversion to anything that stinks of discomfort or sacrifice for the important things. Sure, we often do uncomfortable things, but only when we absolutely have to. And there's really nothing wrong with that. We shouldn't be ashamed that we don't like doing uncomfortable things. That's fine. What we need to remember is the value of suffering. All right, and I say this because of this line, and I'm going to say this right now, and I've said this to students before, and I hope that you all take this to heart. Love is an empty, meaningless platitude, something that we claim and say with absolutely no meaning to it whatsoever without sacrifice. Love is meaningless without sacrifice. Through fasting and almsgiving, we rediscover the value and meaning of sacrifice because it shows us what it means to love God and to love other people, is that we give up some of our own comforts for their sake, for our relationship. We all know that in important relationships in our life, we have to make sacrifices for it to be a healthy relationship. The fact is, though, we're just not used to doing that, and we're especially not used to doing that joyfully. So it's important this Lent that you try to make some sacrifices for God and for people around you. I want to read a verse of the Bible to you. Mark chapter 9. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, a demon, came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast it out?" And he said to them, "This kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer and fasting." Okay. You may think, what has this verse got to do with me? I don't know anyone who's possessed by a demon and is convulsing or speaking in rubbish or any of this stuff. Okay, you may well think that, sure. But you may not know anyone who's convulsing and screaming nonsense. But don't think for a second that you don't know anyone who isn't being affected in some way, influenced in some way. We are all being tempted and tried by demons in our life, trying to get us to give up on our spiritual lives, trying to get us to despair of making any difference, trying to keep us in a constant state of malaise and mediocrity so that we can't become the people that God called us to be. And it is difficult to break out of that stuff. And as Christ says, some of these temptations, some of these trials can really only be alleviated by prayer and fasting. This is the profound reality that Christ gives us. Through our prayer and fasting, we can make a difference. We can be a strong help for those people in our lives who struggle with resisting temptation and trial. We all know people in our lives who struggle with being addicted to drugs or struggle with chronic depression or anger or anxiety or really any other spiritual or physical addiction. So do this for them. Make the sacrifices for their sake, okay? And don't underestimate the power of your intercession. God gives people the grace to get through this stuff in their life, but He also asks us to intercede for that grace. So do this for them, okay? Through the mystery of the power of intercession, ask God to give them the grace to get through their struggles. So that's what I got. Pray, fast, give things away, or give money away, okay? For the 3 reasons. 1, Lent is a perfect time to double down on some vice that you've been struggling with, especially for a long time. 2, to give up some of the things that you fill in the space between required events with, and just spend some of that time praying. 3, interceding for other people through prayer and fasting and almsgiving is the most significant thing that you can do to help them get through the struggles in their life. So be creative in how you apply these, but they should not be external restrictions only on your life, but they need to be real sacrifices for you. And real sacrifices are not things that you just kind of impose on yourself with no, meaning from the inside. You need to embrace them with your heart for the purpose that you're doing these things. I mean, it needs to be intentional. Hence, it's better to fast for something that's meaningful for you rather than just to choose some arbitrary food. More than that, take this opportunity of Lent to push yourself, to do something epic. I mean, be heroic and push your bounds of what you think you can do. Go beyond the normal, go beyond the easy, and actually take a step towards what it means to be a saint. If you're looking for ideas of what to do for Lent and need some more help, if you haven't come up with what you're doing yet, I'll start posting some things on the Facebook page for Faith of Our Flyers to give you some more ideas. You probably should already have an idea of what you're doing, but if you need more help, there's no time like the present to start. Okay.